Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and friends join the Seattle Symphony for Peanuts' 75th anniversary on March 27th, 28th, and 29th at Benaroya Hall. Peanuts comes to the symphonic stage with a live host, actors in costume, imagery from the show, and Vince Guaraldi's music. Plus, use promo code SNOOPY, SNOOPY, to unlock 15% off tickets. Get tickets now at seattlesymphony.org. This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. It's Thursday, and we've got a midweek medley of headlines to discuss. Renaming a park which, until recently, bore the name of Cesar Chavez, a Supreme Court case that could change Washington's mail-in voting, and the potential shuttering of Seattle Central College's Wood Technology Center. But first, Seattle is continuing the conversation about the role of surveillance cameras in our city. Last week, Katie Wilson announced that she would be pausing expansion of the city's CCTV pilot program, but that the existing 60-plus cameras would remain on. There's been a lot of discussion in the city about these cameras. Some people want them to be off, citing security and privacy concerns. Others want them to remain on, thinking that they might help solve crime. And there's actually going to be a town hall at Town Hall Seattle this Friday to discuss it. Today, we've invited Bree McLemore to join us. Dr. McLemore is an assistant professor of law and politics at UW's Political Science Department, and her work focuses on surveillance and privacy. Welcome, Dr. McLemore.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've studied why cities adopt surveillance technologies. What are the most common themes here, and where does Seattle fit into this?
Yeah, so obviously one of the more common themes is safety comes up quite often. And I think there's a lot of questions around that, of the sort of effective around safety. It's really inconclusive, a lot of the studies sort of around that. And you have to always consider the cost of this. So I think the budget for Seattle's was like close to $4 million. And so you have to kind of ask here's these technologies that we don't fully know if they're actually effective. Some studies have actually suggested when it comes to violent crime, they're not really effective at all. And so you have to kind of look at the fact that there are numerous studies and long documented studies showing the effectiveness of many other policies like employment opportunities, mental health care, substance use treatment, stable housing. And those are all sort of crises in Seattle, and especially many cities across the country are facing extreme budget shortfalls. So you have to kind of ask, well, what if we put that money towards policies that we know will actually increase safety while also improving the lives of the most vulnerable people in our communities, and without opening the door to intense surveillance?
What do we know does help? What should we do with that $4 million based on the data?
Stable housing is always a big one that comes up in studies. That's definitely a crisis that we are facing around homelessness. And so $4 million can go a long way to ensuring that people have stable housing. I think health treatment of all sorts, but especially around mental health treatment and substance use treatment are two other policies that could really help with Seattle's quality of life for many residents. And there's a lot of studies that show that is far more effective than what surveillance technologies offer.
You mentioned the impact of surveillance cameras on vulnerable communities as well. What do we know about that impact based on, what data we have and from other cities?
Yeah, so I think along with crime, usually the placement of these technologies, we see high crime come up often as a justification for where these technologies are placed. And that's also been the case in Seattle. And
definitely.
Yeah, so often what they're looking at is data, right? Arrest data, arrest records. And given the history of over-policing in Black and brown neighborhoods, that's where these technologies end up going. And it really just takes a history of discriminatory policing data and kind of makes it seem neutral and objective, when really it's not. It's just completely infused with a lot of history around discriminatory policing. So that's where the technologies go. And it kind of creates like a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways, where, if you inundate a neighborhood with tons of cameras and a lot more police, you're going to have higher crime rates, but not because there's necessarily higher crime there. It's because you've put your magnifying glass there. So it ends up being these communities that are often the target for this. And given the current administration, the federal government, there's a huge concern around that, especially with many of our immigrant communities and ICE, right? And the ability to access this data creates a very huge risk for very vulnerable communities. That's incredibly concerning.
Yeah. I know that coming back to this idea of safety and whether surveillance cameras might be able to help with that, I feel like there are kind of two different questions at play here. Can they actually help prevent crime? Like, are they enough of an actual deterrent for people to avoid committing a crime at all? And then the other question I feel like is, once a crime has been committed, is having that camera there actually helpful in solving the crime? Is there good evidence that these cameras can be useful in solving crimes?
Yeah, so of the studies that have kind of been conducted around this, there's been some conversations around like property and specifically vehicle crime, and so whether they can be used to solve crimes around there. And again, it's a little inconclusive, but there's a little bit more evidence supporting that than around violent crime. But I've spoken to some police officers throughout the country about this, and oftentimes they'll say, like, oh well, when you go to court, you like need that you need camera footage now, like to convince juries. Like it's so central to our investigation. But the reality is like most criminal cases don't go to trial. I think it's like less than like maybe 95% of cases actually go to trial. So really, it's kind of using this evidence to maybe force plea deals that actually kind of keep people from being able to go to court and like make their case, make their argument. And oftentimes we see that many times plea deals don't actually mean guilt. A lot of times that people are kind of put in situations to take plea deals in order to avoid sort of more harsh punishment, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are guilty. And so I think that there's a concern that this technology could be used as a tool to sort of force these plea deals that keep people from actually being able to access the justice system.
Mm. So I know you've studied how cities grapple with these questions about the balance between transparency and accountability. How have other cities made this decision about whether to keep these cameras and how to operate them?
Seattle, along with many other cities, has a surveillance ordinance that was passed in like 2018. And it was the culmination of a lot of organizing and a lot of communities coming together to really, make the case that they want transparency and accountability from their local officials. And also to think about privacy, right? There's a lot of open question around privacy rights in the digital age that has been yet to be resolved. And so I think communities are taking a sort of proactive step to talk about what level of privacy they want and expect in their city and in their communities. But also Seattle's kind of become a model in that way for other cities.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What about Seattle's process do you feel like is going well in that it is becoming a model for other cities?
There's not many models in general in this time. I think that there's probably about 16 cities. I might have to double check that, but that across the country that have passed such ordinances. But Seattle was quite early in that. And so I think the cities are just kind of looking for what this could look like and sort of, and also tailoring it to their own communities. And so I think Seattle being kind of at the forefront of that. So automatic license plate readers, especially those owned by Flock, has been a growing conversation throughout the country. And you see many cities terminate those contracts. And cities have been really thinking more critically about the implications for these technologies.
Yeah. So I know that as part of this mandate that Katie Wilson is trying to fulfill here of bringing data into this question, I know that one concern that she has voiced is whether or not the data from these cameras is being stored and then eventually deleted in a way that protects these communities instead of just, having them in the cloud indefinitely. I know that Seattle is going to be partnering with the NYU Policing Project to conduct an audit of the safety and privacy of these systems. What does the NYU Policing Project do? And do you feel like the work that they do is going to bring answers to these questions that we should be kind of weighing in our decision to keep these cameras on or not?
Yeah, so I think that the audit that the NYU Policing Project is undertaking and that the mayor is pushing for, I think that's a great step. I think it's one of those things that should have happened far like before the technology was ever implemented, right? Like, and we see this happen where questions around privacy in data are not often at the forefront when city leaders and police departments kind of bring this technology forward. It's usually when people kind of push back, which is unfortunate. It shouldn't take that level. It should be kind of one of the overarching questions at the very beginning. But I do think there's always questions around the data. Where is it? Who has access to it? And unfortunately, with a lot of corporations, it can be a little bit of a black box. So we don't fully know a lot of their business practices often. We don't really know sometimes how they're where they're housing the data for how long. But there's not really often a way to kind of double check that or audit it yourself. When you have a third party enter into the sort of surveillance ecosystem, it opens up a lot of questions about where this data is, and it kind of leaves the ability for you to control it. Axon is, the company in question here, which has received a lot of funding from the Department of Homeland Security. So there's questions around that. There's other corporations, often Amazon, that actually provides the server. Well, now you have an additional sort of party as well that has their own contracts and their own sort of sharing agreements that you're not maybe like fully aware of because it's so many steps removed. It just creates so many different entry points for actors to access data that you perhaps aren't intending to share, but does not mean that it doesn't make their way anyways. You mentioned earlier that there's already been cases in Washington state where police departments were sharing data with ICE and they weren't actually authorizing it. The Department of Licensing doing the same, and they weren't even really aware until like journalists kind of exposed this, right? And so it kind of tells you a lot of how many questions and how little transparency there is around this when you introduce so many different parties.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like what is on the books and what actually happens is pretty different. Okay. Last question for you. I want to know what other factors have not come into the conversation yet, or what factors should we be taking into account in this conversation? Like if the city approached you and were like, what are we missing? What would you say we are missing that we should talk more about right now?
So I think that there's been a lot of conversation around the World Cup. And so kind of using that as a reason as to why these technologies are necessary. And there's actually a history around this of large sporting events being used as justification for surveillance. So we've seen this in a lot of cities that have hosted the Olympics. Even though these events are temporary, the surveillance technologies are not. And so once they enter into a space, they don't go away. So yeah, temporary events, but permanent surveillance. And so I think that's something that we should always be cognizant of. And then another concern, I know it's been discussed, but we are bordering a state that is very hostile to reproductive freedoms and trans rights. And so we also are putting our neighbors at risk who maybe are coming here to access reproductive health care and gender affirming care. And I know there's been, conversations around turning off cameras that are in front of a clinic or, blurring. But
right, there's one,
there's
I think,
one
that's being turned off. Yes.
Yeah. But the reality is when you have so many cameras throughout, a city, it's kind of easy to figure out where people are going. Maybe if you don't see them turning into the parking lot, if you have cameras of them leading themselves there, it would be very easy to figure that out. So I think that we're also putting so many different communities at risk with that as well.
Yeah, with what you were saying about the World Cup, Katie Wilson at the press conference last week, where she announced her decision about what she's doing, she said she is installing 26 cameras in the stadium district, but they won't be turned on unless there is a credible threat. And during the question and answer session, when someone asked, what constitutes a credible threat, they said that they are still figuring that out. And I think people do have these lingering questions about, well, what happens to those cameras after the World Cup? Are those going to stay on? Are they eventually going to come down? I guess it all depends on what the city decides in the long run about what to do with those cameras. But Dr. McLemore, thank you so much for lending us your insight today.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for also, talking more about this. I think it's something that's so pressing for a lot of communities and that I think people are very, very interested and concerned about. And so it's great for people to have a space to think about this.
Going to be talking about it for quite a while to come, I sense. Let's take a break. And when we come back, Chase Hutchinson and Liam Billingham and I are going to talk about the bevy of headlines we have going on in town right now. When I first moved to Seattle, I started going to events at Town Hall Seattle as a way of getting to know the city. I've seen events and panel discussions from my favorite authors and thinkers, and I even went to a concert there. Town Hall is a nonprofit with a mission to amplify ideas, foster civil discourse, and connect people through events. They're a community hub. Nearly every night of the week, you'll find a calendar of events spanning civics, science, and arts and culture. And they're housed in a vibrant historic building. The Great Hall is a gorgeous space with stained glass windows, and the Wyncote Northwest Forum got a stunning makeover a few years ago. Coming up on March 29th, ecologist Suzanne Simard and journalist Linda Mapes will discuss the elaborate cycles of forest ecosystems. Get your tickets at townhallseattle.org. Like most town hall events, these tickets are being offered on a sliding scale with free tickets for people under 22. Like many Seattleites, I live in an old house, and it can get drafty with these old windows. Lately, my heat has been running nearly constantly. If that's also the case for you, it could be because your window insulation has failed. Window Nation can check that out for you and get you new, custom-built, high-quality windows. Their installation crews finish the job in 1 day or less, and they offer a lifetime warranty on all of their windows so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. They've installed 3 million windows across the country, and they've got over 45,000 five-star reviews. Right now, the more you buy, the more savings you could enjoy. You can get up to 50% off on all window styles. You can also get them with 0 down, 0 monthly payments, and 0 interest for 2 years. You can schedule a fast, free estimate now at windownation.com. Again, that's windownation.com. We are back with Chase Hutchinson, critic and journalist. Welcome, Chase.
Thanks for having me.
And creative producer Liam Billingham. Hi, Liam.
Hi, Jane. Hello, brother. It has been a while.
I know. Good to see you,
We
brother.
got the brothers on today, the twins.
Haven't shaved, neither one of us.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
So we're trying something a little new today. We're calling it Midweek Medley, where we do a rapid fire rundown of some recent headlines that you all might have missed. So first, Cesar Chavez's name has been removed from the Seattle City Park bearing his name in light of last week's news that the farm worker rights icon has been accused of sexually abusing girls throughout his career. The city dedicated the park to him in 2008, but upon this news breaking, Seattle City Council member Alexis Mercedes Rink and King County Council member Teresa Mosqueda both called for this change immediately. The city is now accepting suggestions from the public for a new name. And in their announcement, they said that the committee will consider names that either reflect the history of the land, distinct natural or geological features, where the park is geographically, historic or cultural significance. And it says it could be named after a person if the person has been dead for a minimum of 3 years, or that they made a significant contribution to parks, rec, or culture in the local community. What should we rename this park?
Well, it can't be Eddie Vedder Park. So
Still alive.
Yeah, thankfully. He's young. That's good.
I was going to say there's something interesting about it has to be someone who's dead. I feel like that's not a thing I had heard typically. Because I feel like there are people that you could honor that are still alive who might appreciate that while they're living.
Yeah.
True.
So who's an alive person that you would name a park after?
I would have to make sure they were okay with it. Let me think.
That's true.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I think my take here is people are fallible.
Yeah.
Even if they are widely loved and made a significant contribution to parks, rec, and culture, it doesn't preclude bad behavior.
But I think this could then open up an opportunity to recognize a collective. Because I think because this was obviously good, critical, years-long reporting that then I think for the most part, people have taken and used as an opportunity to reflect on all of the other people whose names we might not even know, or whose names most people might not even know, that were critical to these movements, to improving people's lives, to labor organizing, to immigrant rights, to all of it. So maybe it could be an opportunity to recognize some sort of collective. It could be migrant workers. It could be farm workers. I think that would be a wonderful kind of poetic, lovely thing.
Yeah, to honor an idea rather than a specific person.
Yeah.
I love that. Also, like, what happened to just naming something after the place where it is? Like, I mean, this park is on Cloverdale. Why not Cloverdale Park?
Yeah. I like that. One of the weirdest things was when we moved to Los Angeles, there's like Johnny Carson Park, Bob Hope Drive.
Oh, no, yeah.
Which is just funny because you're like, where I come from, it's like old dead soldiers. And in California, it's like comedians and talk show hosts.
So what?
Hey,
So what
that's the culture.
So what you're saying is we need a Conan O'Brien Park. Is this what we should do?
Ooh.
He's not dead, though.
He's not dead, thankfully. He's young.
Ken Jennings Park.
Ken Jennings Park.
There's a vague threat of menace to all of these because these people are still alive.
I really just, I'm going to put my flag down for saying, let's just stop naming stuff after people, especially men. Let's just not.
It doesn't seem to be working out.
It's really not going well overall. Okay, on Wednesday, the NBA's Board of Governors voted in favor of exploring expansions in Las Vegas and notably Seattle.
Woo!
The city is signaling its enthusiasm and readiness to have the Sonics back. Mayor Wilson put out a press release and a social media video of her shooting a basketball. And the majority owner of the Kraken bought more equity and climate pledge under a new entity called One Roof Sports and Entertainment, which she says will allow us to consolidate operations and sets us up for future opportunities, which feels like a very heavy foreshadowing for if the Sonics come back. So basically, we're on the road to getting the Sonics back, but nothing has actually happened yet.
Yeah, it's like the positive outcome is on the horizon, but it is still going to be at least a few years.
It would be for the 2028 season, I believe.
Okay.
So definitely the first, I would say, more concrete step, but still for beloved Sonics fans, it's going to be a little bit longer still. Every day brings like a new positive development and hopefully more to come, but it's not like they're going to start drafting players tomorrow. But hey, it's more than what we were in even just like a few months ago, where it felt like Adam Silver was saying, hey, so we really would love to, and like, hey, we're thinking about it.
We're thinking about thinking about
Yeah.
You're such a ball
it.
tease.
Yeah, truly. Okay, terrible. Moving on. Earlier this week, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a case that might put an end to counting ballots received after Election Day. I feel like one of the best things about living in Washington is that we have mail-in voting, and the Supreme Court's decision might change that system months before our midterms, mind you. So basically, the case is going to determine whether voters will have to cast their ballots earlier. So currently, in our state's general election, a ballot that's postmarked on or before Election Day is eligible to be counted. In this new system, voters might have to cast their ballots earlier. They might have to be received by Election Day, on Election Day. So, I mean, if you all remember our election last year, people are very last minute about voting here. Like, I remember being at the Green Lake ballot box at like minutes before the 9 or 8 p.m. cutoff, and people were lined up around the block. There was a ton of traffic of people just trying to drive in to the ballot box. So out of Washington's 5 million registered voters, about 4 million of those ballots were returned by mail in 2024, and half of those were returned on the day of Election Day or the day before. And we know that younger voters tend to turn in their ballots later, and so those younger voters are more likely to be impacted by this ruling. Yeah, I mean, bad news for all of us last-minute people. And bad news because the USPS has also announced this week that they are struggling, so...
Yeah.
Which this just feels like a 1-2 of like, well, what are we even doing this for? Like, why make it harder to vote in any type of way? A vote cast is a vote cast. Like, there is, just to put it out there, no evidence in any sort of way of any widespread or even like minutely meaningful voter fraud that ever comes from mail-in voting. It's people that are procrastinators. I love those people. We are those people. Those people should still have a voice in it. And any sort of encroachment on that is something I've read from advocates, has people concerned for good reason. So I guess we'll be looking again to a Supreme Court decision with trepidation here soon.
And all right, last little bit of news here. The Mariners opening day is today. Brooks is now sponsoring the Salmon Run, which feels like a fitting thing. Brooks local running company. If people are not familiar with the Salmon Run, it's where people dressed up as the 4 local species of salmon race during the 4th inning. And last year, Humpy became very popular because Humpy's the pink salmon. And apparently the pink salmon hadn't been winning any of those races, but Humpy had a big comeback. So
what I'm about to say is complimentary. This is the dorkiest place in the world. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Said with love.
Mm-hmm. And affection. From one dork to a city and a state of dorks.
Since we're talking dorky, I'm excited for baseball, and I'll use this as an opportunity to say, if you're looking to get on board with the Seattle Mariners, you should do it. They're one of the dorkiest, weirdest, strangest teams you will ever see. Go watch the documentary, The History of the Seattle Mariners. It's a great time, and it'll get you right up to speed with basically everything you need to know. They're a blast.
Yeah, I'm excited to get out to some of those $12 games and have some of the delicious treats that are at the field.
Good treats this year.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll do Cut to the Chase, our arts and culture corner.
Hi, CityCast listeners. This is David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, but I also have another job. I'm one of the hosts of the Political Gabfest, Slate's politics podcast. Every week, I get on mic with my co-hosts Emily Bazelon and John Dickerson, and we talk about politics and a lot more about other things that we care about. The Gabfest has been going for more than 20 years because the three of us love talking to each other, and we have an amazing community of listeners. If you like the open-hearted, curious way CityCast approaches cities, I think you'll like the Political Gabfest too. Stream it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Also, leave us a little review. It's really helpful. And tell your friends about us. You can also get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. And you can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at CityCast Seattle. And you can watch full episodes of this show on YouTube. All right, so we have Chase Hutchinson with us for our mostly weekly segment, Cut to the Chase, where Chase gives us the latest arts and culture news around Puget Sound. Chase, I know you wrote a piece for The Stranger this week about how Seattle Central's Wood Technology Center might be closing. First of all, what is the Wood Technology Center? It's an amazing name, and I hadn't heard about them before reading your piece.
So essentially, the Wood Technology Center is a trade program. There are multiple programs that typically have to do with construction work, and they're training you to do these things. And the reason they kind of connect to the arts and culture of it all is Seattle Central College also owns many other buildings and blocks, specifically the Egyptian as well, which
they own the theater.
They own the theater, yes.
Okay,
and
I think I knew that. But yeah.
They've said that they're considering selling all of their properties. But essentially, the important thing to be known here is that staff and students are wanting to raise the alarm and say, this is going to be a huge potential loss, where after this upcoming fall quarter, that's when they're potentially going to stop enrolling any students, which means there's going to be a loss to the local industries that benefit from skilled labor. A lot of people I talked to, and this didn't make it as much into the piece, talk about how this is a job that is AI proof. AI is never going to be able to build a house. AI is never going to be able to do construction.
You wouldn't download a house.
Yeah, exactly. And so what they're hoping to see is some sort of reprieve granted, some sort of other solution to the financial challenges that are happening, because they're concerned if this goes away, because the hope is to have it end up at a sister school or some sort of other program. The feeling is if this goes away, it might never come back, and that all these students that benefited, oftentimes students that don't typically work in these fields or didn't have access to these fields, women, trans people, people of color, they're all kind of concerned that this being on the chopping block could really negatively impact them and the state.
Yeah, I mean, I also just think that academia isn't in great shape, right? And more people are going to want to have a trade skill. Like, I just feel like that's the thing. And when these sort of like lower cost programs that serve people go away, that's about the worst thing that can happen from like a growth and development perspective. So this is like very distressing news.
I guess what I'm curious about is like, what is Seattle Central's focus then?
Essentially, they're at a point where they're trying to stay afloat. The specific statement I was given by Barb Childs, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Public Relations and Strategic Initiatives, was, "We are considering the sale of Seattle College's properties, including Seattle Central's Wood Technology property, and relocating the programs where applicable to sister colleges. As we consider the sale of properties, we are seeking the most seamless and softest landing for our students and employees. We are exploring this decision due to structural funding challenges facing community colleges across our state, including declining state funding and rising operating costs." There are some people that are a little skeptical about why they're in financial straits and kind of how we got here. There was a column in the Seattle Times Danny Westneat wrote where he also kind of raised concerns, calling that the school had made some howling budget flubs in the past and saying that there's been fiscal mismanagement. But whatever kind of the perspective is, there's a current crisis now that is going to be impacting the students potentially very soon. And they're hoping that there can be other solutions found out, and they're working at it now to try and push the needle in a better direction.
Yeah, I feel like with the construction boom in town, you would really think that supporting a program like this would be top priority. But I guess also if you are in a budget crisis, there's maybe not a lot you can do. And based on Seattle Central's location, I imagine that a lot of their property is highly, highly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what's partly motivating some of this. But there's still the thing that I wanted to make sure to highlight, which is that I spoke to Katie Chaplin, who is an award-winning professor at the university, was named the 2017 Instructor of the Year by the Washington Women in Trades. And what Katie told me is, "We understand there's a budget crisis and community colleges are in a world of hurt, but the years of financial decisions that got us here shouldn't be balanced on selling an irreplaceable campus."
Yeah.
I mean, what is the way out of this? Are there grant makers in town that would support this? Are there billionaires that want to throw some money at this? What's the pipeline for getting community colleges funded?
I don't think anybody would say no to that. That is something that Chaplin had mentioned, that more grants and partnerships could allow the program to continue or get some sort of reprieve. The institution received a $750,000 grant from the Lowe's Foundation in 2024. But I also know and have talked to people that grant funding is not always as easy to get as just, we're just going to do it and it'll be easy.
Oh, yeah. You got to pay someone to write those grants. And that in itself is a cost that you got to bear over time.
Yeah.
And $750,000, while a good chunk of change as an individual, for an institution running a college, it seems like that wouldn't cover operating costs for any program for very long.
Yeah.
Chase, what else is going on in our region?
Well, I'll talk about some positive things, which is that NIFTY, the National Film Festival for Talented Youth, is starting tonight when people are listening to this at SIF, which basically this is entirely youth-made films. It's something that SIF has done for quite a while. And it's a way to support the youths, the next new voices, the exciting artists and filmmakers that are making work, demonstrating what they've got. And it's got good speakers that are coming of interesting filmmakers as well. It's very reasonable in many regards in terms of affordability of festivals. And I still think also it's like a worthwhile thing to do to support them.
Let the kids make films.
Let the kids make films.
And what a great acronym. What a great acronym.
Yes, it's a very good one. It just rolls off the tongue. It's nifty. So
would you say it's a nifty? Damn it, you beat me to it. Never mind.
I would say it's a nifty little festival to go check out. Yes. And then the only other thing, SIF did announce that their opening night film for their festival here in May is going to be Boots Riley's I Love Boosters, which I won't spoil or talk about too much, but it is one of the most galaxy-brained, maddening, fascinating movies I've ever seen. And
Wow.
I say this all as a compliment. So those are kind of the two positive, exciting arts and film news that I had this week.
Wonderful, Chase. And we now have a surprise for you, which is Liam has made a theme song for Cut to the Chase. We've done this enough times that we decided it's time for there to be an official theme.
Yes, that's what, or I impulsively made this. We can decide which one.
No. Careful. It's labored over this.
Labored
Days,
hours of my
nights.
Yeah.
I was calling Jade at 3 a.m. asking her weird questions about Cut to the Chase. Okay, here it is.
Cut to the chase.
So I love it. This is the best gift anyone has given me. It sounds like a cooler, hipper version of the Mr. Rogers theme, where he opens the door and takes off the sweaters with the little piano notes.
You're Mr. Rogers in my heart,
Oh,
Chase.
thank you.
You got to take off your shoes and put on your slippers
Exactly.
as we get ready for Cut to the Chase.
I literally do that, guys, every day when I get home. I'm like, oh, time for my dad's shoes so I don't fall in the house.
All right. Well, maybe we'll play this at the beginning of the next Cut to the Chase, but introducing the new theme song. That's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Liam, thank you for making this nifty little theme.
Yeah, that's the word of the day. So there you go. Enjoy.
And Chase, thank you so much, as always, for bringing us your news from around the sound.
Thanks for having me, as always.
I'm your host, Jane C. Hu, and listeners, we love hearing from you all. Send us your news tips, your questions, your thoughts on what we should rename that park in the South Park neighborhood by sending an email to seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast hotline at 206-880-3931. Yes, we actually do listen to the voicemails. And in fact, the voicemails are my favorite ones because I actually get to hear your voice. But you can also text us if you're feeling a little phone shy. Until next time, see you, Seattle.